welcome back to She Changed History. I'm Simon.
I'm Vicky.
And it's Vicky's turn to tell us a story today. I know the title and nothing else.
So, in the darkness of Nazi-occupied Poland, one woman risked everything to save lives. You've likely heard of Oskar Schindler, but his story pales next to Irena Sendler's. This unassuming woman smuggled over 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto, defying death at every turn. Today, we dive deep into Irena Sendler's courage, the network she built, and the daring escapes that saved countless lives. Be prepared to be inspired by a story of bravery, resilience, and the power of human connection.
It's a strong opener.
They're always strong openers. I love it. So our sources today are a Jack Mayer article from 2000 on the NEH website, irenasendler.org, and when I first found this story, it was through My Favourite Murder. It was episode 290 of their podcast called Full Meta Recovery. And then there's a bunch of other sources that will pop in the notes at the end. So yeah, it's a good one. So we're going to start off in Kansas, of all places. So we're going to start off in autumn 1999, rural Kansas.
You said there were twists, but I wasn't expecting one right at the start.
Full on Kansas, yeah. Where there's a teacher there and he wants his students to put a project together for National History Day. And the reason he wants to do this is because it extends the boundaries of the classroom, it contributes to the learning of history, it teaches respect and tolerance, and meets their classroom motto. And his classroom motto is, "He who changes one person changes the entire world." So already quite profound. So the people who put their hands up for this are two 9th graders. One is called Megan Stewart, one is called Elizabeth Chambers, and an 11th grader, which is Sabrina Coons. Obviously, this is America and Kansas. I'm not sure what 9th grader is. I think that's like 14.
I think about 13, 14, yeah.
Yeah, so they accept the challenge and they decide to enter their project into the National History Day programme. So it's a huge programme throughout the country. As the story goes on, more students will get on board, but they're the three that started with their teacher, who's called Norm. He's called Mr. Connard. Norm Connard. So yeah, like I said, we're in Kansas. We're in a town called Uniontown. It's a really small town. It's only got a population of 264. So that's like a street here. It's
bad news, America. That's not a town.
That's not a town. Many stores, but they're all shuttered up. It's very almost like Depression era. Like the pictures are very almost like Wild West. Deserted. The high school itself only has 120 students. It's one of the lowest income districts in the whole of Kansas. There's no diversity at the school. I think that's really important because it's so small, I guess. There's like 260 people. No Jews, no African Americans, not even a Catholic.
Not even a Catholic.
Not even a Catholic. Could you believe it?
Wow.
But that makes their story even more popping. It's even more wow when we get there. So what kicks off the project is Mr. Connard. He shows the girls a short clipping from a issue of the News. I was going to say News of the World, but that's British. This is called News and World Report. So it's 1994, and the article's called "The Other Schindlers," and it says Irena Sendler saved many children and adults from the Warsaw Ghetto in 1942. Her network saved children from the ghetto, plus providing locations for over 2,000 children. So that's what's in the article. Norm tells the girls that's probably wrong because Schindler did 1,200, right? So they were like, "Oh, it's probably just a typo or something. Don't worry about it. Just see what you can find."
An extra 0 or 2 on the end.
Yeah, he was like that. Just have a dig. So the students do, the girls dig, and they only find one other mention of Irena, which was in 1965 at the Holocaust Museum in Israel, and it says that Irena was given an honor. The honor was called Righteous Among the Nations, but that's it. So that's all they could find on her. So they were like, "Oh, this isn't really the best topic they want." They did have Google back then, but obviously 1999 Google is not our Google, different Google. So they did pop her name in there and she got one hit.
Wow.
She got one result, which is pretty astonishing.
That's a Google whack. There used to be a challenge to find things that you could search on Google and would give you a single hit.
No, and that it was
Yeah,
called Google Whack.
Google Whack. Dave Gorman did a whole sort of show on it and series of
Hmm.
finding these Google Whacks. I don't think it's possible these days to come up with just one
No,
hit.
no way. Because sometimes you get none. You just get that little dude with the fishing rod,
Yeah.
don't you? When you try and Google a phone number or something, and he's like, "I've got nothing for you, mate. I've got nothing." So most Holocaust museums didn't have anything on Irina either, and they couldn't help the girls with their project. The US Holocaust Museum had her, but actually it turns out that they had all the information wrong. They had her birth year wrong, and they thought that she had died.
Oh,
The students contacted the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous, and it turns out that Irina was in fact alive. She was still in Warsaw, so she was still in the town where she was, brought up.
oh
So
wow. So this
saved,
is like 60 years later, nearly.
yeah, 100%. She hadn't gone anywhere. So she saved all those children and then was basically written out of history until these kids found her. She was living in Warsaw. She was there with her daughter-in-law and just very much keeping to herself. And at this point, she's in her 90s as well.
He's flipping out. She's a real survivor.
Yeah. So when this was found, Jack Mayer says in his article and book, he says that he was stunned. He said, "I'm a child of the Holocaust survivors. How could I not know about her story and who she was? Everyone knows about Schindler, who rescued over 1,000 Jews from a German concentration camp in Poland, and whose story was told by Steven Spielberg's in Schindler's List."
Well, like, how are more people not talking? If that number is right, 2,500,
Mhm. Mhm.
then surely did those kids know that they'd been saved, or did she just? I'm jumping ahead here. Did she just save them
Mhm.
and um, sort of not take any credit for it?
Mhm. All will
There's
become
so many people
clear.
they must have
Yeah.
done.
All will become clear. So the Kansas girls, they're really excited when the museum say, "Oh, actually, she's alive," and they couldn't believe that they managed to find out this about Irina off the one-liner in an article. So what
Mm.
they do is they know she's in Warsaw, so they actually reach out to her and write a letter and said that actually we're going to do a project on you over here. And they didn't expect anything back. They're in rural Kansas, this random 90-year-old in Poland. They really didn't expect anything. But you know what? Irina replied. She replied, and
Wow.
she replied with 7 whole pages of stories from Irina, which is pretty amazing, isn't
Oh,
it?
she really replied.
She
Yeah.
really replied. Problem was, it was all in Polish. So they had to find a translator. And they found out that, yes, Irina lives in Warsaw. She lives with her daughter-in-law. She is in a bit of poverty. Like, they're really struggling to make ends meet. So, as part of the school project, the girls are doing, they need to put on a play. And they started doing that. And they also had this idea about they could maybe go to Warsaw and meet Irina. So they essentially become pen pals over the course of the year. They started selling candy, but obviously, as we've learned, Uniontown is quite small. So they only got $81 from selling candy. So it wasn't
That's
going great for them.
so wholesome and sort of classic Americana, isn't it?
It's so cute.
Little
So
rural
yeah, they got
Kansas town.
$81. But the Jewish Foundation, how nice is this? Actually pulled together some Holocaust survivors and they actually donated towards the girls' trip. Like I said, there's no Jews in this town. It was just pure that they loved what the girls were doing and they loved the
Yeah.
story and that Irina had reached out. So the kindness there is just, it's just such a cute little extra layer.
Mm.
So they go and visit Irina. So over the next few years, the project and the friendship between the girls and Irina blossoms, and they ended up documenting and collecting documents on all the work that Irina did. So, shall we talk a little bit about Irina and who she is and what she's doing?
Mm. I just wondering, like, what motivates someone to do all of this? What sort of environment do you have to grow up in to then sort of give yourself to rescuing these people? Because it must have been so dangerous in the ghettos.
You know what? I think in the research, it was probably her father.
Okay.
So she was born in 1910. She's born Roman Catholic. So again, she's not Jewish and she was an only child. Her dad was actually a physician. And as the war broke out, he was the only one treating typhus outbreaks. All the other doctors, they were scared of it. They didn't want to go near it.
Okay.
So she said that it was actually her father's teaching that inspired her. Apparently, he used to say, if you see someone drowning, you must rescue them, even if you cannot swim. And another thing he used to instill in her was that only two kinds of people in the world, good and bad, regardless of race, religion, and creed. And for the most part, people are good. So he's out there, he's like fighting the good fight, and he's teaching through actions, I guess.
Yeah. It's not
sadly,
just preaching, he's really sort of getting involved.
Yeah, he's actually 100% doing it. And
typhus as well, that's risky.
Yeah, in the end, he actually dies, which is really sad. And he does die from the typhus, but how many people did he save, you know? So, and this is also in Poland. So Poland is arguably the most victimized country in occupied Europe from the World Wars. The consequence for hiding or even feeding a Jew in World War II was execution, often in public. So it warned other Polish people, don't do it, don't get involved.
Wow.
Yeah, when she starts working, she becomes a social worker in the welfare department of Warsaw, Poland. Warsaw is the largest city in Poland. When asked about kind of what you were saying, what drove her and what put her family and other people at such risk, she said, it was a need of my heart. I only did what any decent person would do. The heroes were the babies. They were the heroes of their mothers' hearts. It was the parents and the grandparents who gave up their children. They were the true heroes.
Oh my God.
I know. So, like beautiful. You were saying earlier, the humility is so strong. So in her letters to the girls, she explains that she started to help the city's Jews, providing them with food and water as she was working in the canteen department for the welfare thing. The Nazis invaded in 1939 Poland, and they had the largest Jewish population in Poland. Warsaw did, with 3 million. So Irina, she's running this canteen. She's like, you know what? They actually need clothing and they need medicine. So she's on it. She's like, I'll just add that. She doesn't ask anyone. She just does it. However, once the ghetto was built in Warsaw, this kind of cuts Irina's access off to the people who need their aid. Do you know much about the ghettos? Because I didn't when I was researching it.
Not a great deal, no. I mean, I know they were horrific, crammed in, awful conditions, really poor medical care, just like absolute poverty, famine, and just like gated. I mean, they were a prison in the middle of a city, weren't they? People were just caged in, like sort of battery hens.
So it's kind of the size of the Warsaw one was the size of Central Park, basically. So, but in there it had 35,000 people. I know. And oh my God. Like you said, it was squalor, famine. It was locked, so nobody could get in and out.
I mean, disease must have spread so quickly in there. So I can't imagine they had like great facilities.
Yeah, 100%. And it got to the point where actually that's a really key part of the story. So when Irina started, so she couldn't get the supplies in anymore because it was all gated.
Okay. So at the start, was she was, before they were in the ghetto, she was just working in a canteen and sort of stealing some provisions and handing them off, which she could have been killed for.
Yeah, 100%.
Just for giving them a glass of water. Well,
but when the ghetto was built, she used her status as a social worker to gain access to the ghetto. There was another story that actually she used what you were saying, the spread of disease, to like play off the guards. So she was saying, I need to inspect the sanitary conditions of the place. The guards were saying no. And she was like, well, are you going to go and do it then? And the guards said, no, I'm not going to go and do it because I'm going to get a disease, right? So she kind of used that against them, and that's what it was, pure tenacity that got her through those gates.
It keeps cropping up, doesn't it? Like story after story, there just seems to be some sort of inner fire that drives these people onwards, and it's not that none of them at the beginning, whether it's maybe the Olympics is the one exception, but there doesn't seem to be an absolute aim at the beginning. It's just like, I'm going to do this one thing because that's the right thing to do. And then it escalates, it sort of creeps up ever more gradually until suddenly she's sort of conning guards into letting her into the ghetto.
And it's also just cockiness, isn't it? It's just having that such a strong moral compass that this is the right thing to do. So she's basically played off the guards, and then she then got access to the children and the people who needed help on the inside of the gates, and then she was smuggling in medication, whatever. When she got across the gate, she started collecting Jewish people and children and smuggling them out. She used people that she knew on the other side of the gate who were willing to hide them. So this was seen as her rescue network. So she was like connecting the two. She was like, I've got my friends on the outside of the gate, and then I'll bring them across. This kind of escalates quite rapidly because a Polish resistance group, the Provision Committee for the Aid to Jews, or Ghetto, actually was formed in 1942, and they brought Irina on board. So she was doing all this anyway, like as a side hustle, if you like, a really humanitarian side hustle. And then this resistance group is formed, and then they kind of team them up. So the resistance group Ghetto was founded by Adolf Birdman, and he recruited Irina as part of these 24 people. She's given a code name, Yolanta, and she was appointed the head of the children's division because she was so good at this smuggling. Irina visits the ghetto every day, but another thing to note is that 28,000 Jews have moved out to the gas chambers. 28,000 out of the 35,000. This is called the liquidation of the ghetto, which is absolutely atrocious name.
Horrific, isn't it?
Yeah. And basically they're sending people to Treblinka, which is the largest extermination camp other than Auschwitz. Overall, just as about 900 people were killed there during the war in Treblinka. It's an astonishing number. It's hard.
900,000 people.
Yeah, it's hard to visualize, isn't it? Such a number of people.
If you think of the industrial scale it's on.
It's vile. It's so vile. And if you think of a stadium of people visiting a concert, or like Taylor Swift concerts and things like that.
Went to see Taylor Swift. Slight brag. In Wembley, and there were 92,000 people there. So a tenth.
Yeah, 10 of them.
So 10 full Wembley stadiums were killed at just... It's kind of amazing, because this all happened at a time, like the UN wasn't formed until after the war. So the UN was 1945. Okay. And now we've got all of these organisations that go out, and we've got peacekeeping troops. There are still atrocities happening in the world. We tend to have like better visibility on them, and we've got much more advanced news reporting. We've got groups that go in, and the Red Cross that surveyed. So we at least sort of know about it, but there were no... This is just people disagreeing with something and doing something about it. And you mentioned like this Ghetto, was it?
And there's only 24 people founded Ghetto. So if you compare that to the 900,000 that were killed, it's minuscule, isn't it?
And was that quite like instrumental in how did the network help her?
Oh my gosh, so much. So the first thing they did was actually they got her a nursing card. So they got her a fake ID, basically. And she got that from one of the members in the Ghetto group. And so that's how she got into the camp legitimately. So she didn't have to con these people anymore. She could just walk in because she's got this disease nursing card.
Yeah.
And then Irina goes around asking people to give up their children. She starts with the orphans because that makes much more sense because she doesn't have to convince anyone. So, but once she's got all the orphans, she goes back and then she starts asking people to give up their children and their grandchildren so she could smuggle them out. Obviously, this is quite a difficult conversation to have with someone. One of the things she used to say is that, so you have a parent saying, can you guarantee they're going to live? And she could say, well, I can guarantee if they stay here, they won't. And that was the only thing that could get people to do. So she could smuggle out more people using Ghetto. And they had 4 main ways to smuggle children out. Would you like to know the 4 ways that they smuggled the children out?
No.
You're going to get them because they're very good.
I'm just sort of sitting in the absolute heartbreak of having to ask parents that question. Just sort of sitting with it. It's so awful for the parents to have to make that decision. I've been listening a lot lately to podcasts about a totally different topic, but the Lucy Letby trial and all that, and just these parents of such premature babies having to make that decision to let their baby go, and sitting with it, and it's like nature clashing with sense.
Yeah.
It's
and also in this scenario, I kind of thought that Irina's also telling the parents that they're probably going to die as well. Like by answering in that way, she's saying that, well, you're not going to live either. There's like that undertone. But she does smuggle these children out. She smuggles them out in 4 different ways.
4 different ways, lovely. Tell me. Can't wait
Tell
to
me. The
hear.
first one was that there was an old courthouse in the ghetto and a Catholic church. They actually had an entrance into and from the ghetto, so underground, that the guards didn't know
Okay.
about. So that was one. They used to use
Oh, I've
sewers,
been.
so go through the sewers.
Okay, so these are classic movie escape things. Dress up as a small Catholic child through the sewers.
Absolutely.
Is it on a fruit cart?
Very close. A luggage bag. So
Right,
really
okay.
small children, you could put in luggage bags and take them out on a trolley. And also via ambulances, which is probably a really legitimate way out. So if you actually have an ill child, you'd stick them on a stretcher and get them out. But you could
Okay.
also hide the children under stretchers. You could hide them in things like potato sacks or get the children to fake an illness. And the guards were like, well, I don't want them here, get them gone.
Isn't it weird
So
that the guards are so worried about illness when the people are here specifically getting ready to go off to
they're
be?
worried about their own illness, aren't they?
Yeah, of
Like
course.
they're
Yeah,
worried
yeah.
about their own dying, I think. But the other thing to note is that obviously you can't just shove a child in a luggage bag in a suitcase. She had to sedate them and sedate them really carefully as well. So it was enough to keep them asleep and not enough to kill them. So that was also another thing that she was doing. And huge risks. Like that's a huge thing to put under a child's body, that strain.
I guess you just thought that anything, even with a smaller chance of working, is better than the sort of guaranteed death if they stayed there. But like any
So
of these things, if she got caught for any of it, I mean, how do you can't explain a child under like in a potato sack?
be quite
So
difficult.
dangerous.
Quite difficult. Irina used her contacts with different places on the outside, so things like orphanages, religious institutes, so they could take the vulnerable children. She would give them false Christian names, and then the children who were old enough to talk, she taught them the cross and Catholic prayers. So,
And did like the kids who were young enough that they didn't know what was going on,
hmm.
she couldn't teach. Did they keep their Christian names? Were they aware of any of this? Did they even know they'd been in the ghetto or rescued or anything?
It very much depends on the parents and what the parents wanted them to know as well.
Okay.
But one thing Irina does do, and she continues to do, is focus on the fact that they must be returned to their Jewish relatives when the war is over. She promises this
Okay.
to the parents. The fake identities that she puts to them. She also fakes documents with their signatures on, makes them really legitimate. But Irina is the only one in the resistant group that knows the names, the original families, the original addresses, locations, everything. Irina
Oh,
makes a
no one else in the network. No one in Skota.
no, which was really smart. Irina makes a
Wow.
code. She hand writes it on really, really thin tissue paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then she rolls up the tissue papers, pops them in a jar, and then pops the jar under an apple tree of somebody else's garden in the network. They were like, you could have my garden. So she hides these jars. And that's why the book and the play that was later written about her was called Life in a Jar.
Oh,
I know.
is this the play that the girls were writing?
And there's been a book since because of all the
Oh.
research the girls did, and that's her legacy is Life in a Jar.
I wonder how
So
many of those kids found out that they'd been rescued by her, and what it. I wonder what it's like finding out that you were smuggled out in a potato sack and saved by
absolutely.
this woman that
So
you've otherwise never heard of.
there's a couple of stories. So one of the children saved was from a woman, sorry, it was a woman called Alipita Ziputa. She was saved at just 5 months old. She was popped in a carpenter's box and she was smuggled out by Irina. When her parents said goodbye, they left her with a small spoon that had her first name and her date of birth inscribed on. And that's the only momentum she has of her previous life, right? And it was actually her who became Irina's caregiver in later life, which is just like, oh my gosh, what a story. Another person sees her picture in the paper when this all comes out and says, I remember your face. You got me out the ghetto. So people
Wow.
do remember her.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they know they were saved. They know they were saved by someone,
Yeah,
but until now hadn't been.
yeah.
Irina needed a better PR team.
She- So this resistant groups has really helped her like double up her efforts, but it's actually part of her downfall as well, this resistant group.
Mhm.
So one of the Scato members is captured and tortured, and they actually gave up information in this torture. This leads to the enemy finding and arresting Irina. So she went to court and she went to prison. She went to Polwock prison in 1943, which is a notorious prison in the ghetto. She was there for 8 weeks. And some people don't even come out of like that alive. You know, it's one of those prisons. She is tortured and pressed for information. They fracture her legs, her feet, but she does not give up any of the information. She doesn't say anything. She keeps to the pre-written answers that were agreed by Zagata. So they had like a code, and this is what you stick to. And she didn't break once, even though they fractured her legs and everything.
I'm amazed they didn't just kill her.
Well, she's sentenced to death. So they want to kill her. They do want to do that. But thankfully, Zagata, they bribe the executioner, and the executioner takes the bribe and helps Irina live.
Excellent.
He helped her escape, but then days later he's executed himself by the Nazis for letting her go and helping her.
Can't feel an enormous amount of sympathy for a Nazi executioner.
Yeah, but isn't that insane that he died? It wasn't, she didn't die, he died. So for the rest of the war after that happens, Irina does go into hiding. No one knows where she is, because obviously Nazis don't like it when people run away. So
presumably she's hiding in a jar under an apple tree.
Maybe. But she keeps helping the Jewish people even from hiding, because she has built up this network. So this is like 4 years into this now. Like, but she was doing it herself, and then she got part of the resistance group. So a massive network. When the war is over, she goes back to the apple tree and digs up the jars. She follows through on her promise, which makes me love her even more. She starts trying to find the parents. This is quite a difficult task, because it's really important to note that less than 1% of Jewish people in the ghetto survived.
Oh my word.
A staggering stat. And we were just talking about those stadiums of people, 1% survived. Yeah. But it does make you think that those parents did the right thing. You know, that really hard conversation on your front doorstep. They definitely did the right thing.
Definitely, yeah.
Another depressing fact is that 1.5 million Jewish children were killed in the Holocaust. So Irina's got a really tall order. It's very difficult to find the parents. She found a few, but she shares the list as much as she could, even if she couldn't find the parents, to try and find the relatives. So
I imagine loads of the relatives probably living outside of Poland as well, or fled earlier on, or so there's not even Ask Jeeves at this point, is there? There's no ancestry.com.
Yeah, and it is just through sharing her information and her lists, and thank God her record keeping was so good. Yeah. Irina then tries and carries on with life. So she marries, she raises 2 children, she goes back to social work, and she gets on with her life as much as she can. But throughout her life, she continues to try and find and matches the parents to the children.
How did her story not come out sooner? And I'm not, downplaying News and World. But how is it that the only mention is like News and World and some incorrect info in a museum? How does it stay contained? How can she just return to normal life?
I think what happened, I think it was her choice and her choice from a place of fear. So after the war, communists take over Poland. Zagata is labelled as fascists, and they're harassed and they're imprisoned. And obviously she's experienced that. She's been through this horrible torture, and she probably doesn't want to revisit that, and she probably doesn't want to risk that. So even when she's trying to find these children, it's very secret, very slow, very under the radar. Having said that, she was given awards, but this happens much, much later in life. She was honoured with the Righteous Among Nations. And then what happens is the story goes quiet until 1999. Until Norm says, here's that article, off you go. Yeah.
Was it 1965 you said she got that award? So like 20 years after the war, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Still can't quite get over that it's students from a small Kansas town. Their teacher Norm. Let's not forget that.
Just Norm. Thank God for Norm. Hey,
it's Norm.
Thank God for Norm. They complete their school project. Goes really well. Norm actually starts producing a play based on the research of her life story, and then he calls that Life in a Jar. The play was actually quite a good success. It staged over 200 times in the United States and abroad, and that very much contributed to publicizing her story. Like, that's how it was normal, basically. This is the thing about Irina's story. Like, this moment happens in 1999 and it carries on. So she keeps in touch with Norm and the girls all the way through the rest of her life. In 2003, Pope John Paul II sent Sendler a personal letter praising her for her wartime efforts. In November of that year, she receives the Order of the White Eagle, which is Poland's highest civilian decoration. So that's like the VC in our world. She gets multiple awards. She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2007.
Only nominated?
Well, that year it went to Al Gore. So
okay.
yeah, just like, okay.
Just a bit of a letdown.
She has a movie now called Life in a Jar. Schools are named after her all over the world. Thanks to these girls and Norm, her story does carry on.
How amazing, these girls, how amazing must they think Catholic people are if they've never met one before, and then the only one that they know is Irina. Oh my God.
She's a shining example. Yeah. Also, this is a cute little fact. She went from one Google hit to over 800,000 hits on Google. And then she even got in 2020 a Google Doodle, which I added in the notes because it was really beautiful. It's a really lovely Google Doodle of an apple tree and the jars under the tree and her by the tree. She passes away in 2008, so she got this recognition so late in her life.
Wow.
And she is noted as saying she never felt like she did enough, really. It's really important to note that, so Norm has went to visit her continuously and continues to visit her grave. The girls, Elizabeth Chambers, she married and is Elizabeth Hutton. She has 2 master's degrees and teaches Holocaust history in Missouri. Sabrina Coons Murphy is an elementary teacher in Kansas, and Megan Stewart Fell is the program coordinator for the Irena Sendler Life in a Jar Foundation. Megan and Norm still work together on furthering Sendler's legacy and continue to do the performances of Life in a Jar. This tiny, tiny little community, you can tell it was such a moment in their lives. I don't think you get that many moments in life where it is such a coming together, and these girls got it so young, and Norm and Irina got it so late, and it was just such a, what an unmasking, what a, what a force of good they did. So that is the story of Irena Sendler.
It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Isn't it?
Can we just as well give a shout out to Norm?
Norm's the best. We love Norm.
Love you, Norm.
Best teacher ever, 100%. Without,
and like a little snippet in a newspaper. And looking at what those girls have gone on to do now, I wonder how many people who were saved by her have now found out about it from their work. Yeah.
And maybe even Norm kind of I kind of thought that maybe he felt a bit bad for assuming it was a typo right at the beginning, because he said to the girls, "Oh, that's probably a typo, don't worry about it." And actually it turns out that it was fact. Well, I guess that's like unconscious bias to my mind, that he, it must be Schindler because that's the one we know about. So
okay. Yeah, maybe it's my unconscious bias telling me that it's not my unconscious bias. But it sounds like a ridiculous figure. 2,500 children from the lockdown ghetto without getting killed herself. She's lived to 90. Like, it doesn't sound like it's possible.
And she visited every day for 2 years, so it was consistency.
What was the quote that you gave earlier? I think from her father. If you change one, there's something about if you just change one.
That was the classroom motto. So the classroom motto was, "He who changes one person changes the world entire." Yeah. And he did that. So yeah. Shout out to Norm. Norm.
I think we should use that motto for listener stories.
It's very nice.
You never know, just one small action, like asking a question, having a second take at something, doing a little thing. You never know how that sort of butterfly effect is going to.
Okay, that's lovely. Yeah.
So
I like that.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you, Vicky. Yeah, favourite one so far. Well, I'm pretty sure I say that about every one that we
know, but isn't that just the level of the stories we're getting? That's so good.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So please rate, review, subscribe to anything, click follow, any ad on any wherever you get your podcast, please do.
Yeah.
And please send
my
in
absolute
stories.
dream is that if you or your family were one of those saved by Irena, please get in touch.
Oh my gosh, please,
that would be
please.
incredible to hear about how you found out about it, what you knew. Yeah, leave a comment, drop us an email, shechangedhistory@gmail.com.
Yeah, please share your stories.
Yeah, share your stories and join us next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.